Depression. It was once nothing more than a distant concept to me, an abstract notion that seemed disconnected from my own reality. Protected in my bubble, I remained blissfully unaware of the depths of cruelty that the world could harbor. That is until my second semester of college at UT Austin when tragedy struck. As a person I knew, whose identity I will respectfully keep private to honor their family's privacy, leapt from a 7-story building, plunging to a devastating and untimely end. In that moment, it felt as if a needle had violently punctured the delicate balloon of my innocence. Why? Why would someone so young be driven to such a desperate act? Countless questions swirled within me, their weight pressing down on my soul. This encounter with death and grief thrust me into a harsh confrontation with the reality of human fragility. Motivated with a thirst for understanding, I embarked on a journey of research and exploration. I wanted to know people's stories. It soon became clear that this tragedy was not an isolated incident confined to the boundaries of UT Austin. It was a part of a national sweeping crisis.
I think some common misperceptions about mental health, for one, talking about gender, is that it's a disorder and it's a struggle that is really predominantly in women, and I think that's very much not the case.
My name is Anio Flores.
All right. So, what inspired you to share your story about mental health and depression?
Just the fact that our mental health isn't really I talked about much, and it's so sad that at the time men tried I reached out our help, it's a bit too late.
Well, I think sometimes gender and cultural considerations are sometimes mixed, and then sometimes they're appropriately kept separately. So starting with kind of cultural or societal messages around depression for boys and girls, men and women, definitely a big factor there. There's a lot of research that shows that real little kiddos, you get no differences in terms of crying, in terms of reporting being sad, in terms of reporting being depressed, even in their own, unique ways. And then something starts to happen along the way, and messages for boys, for example, start to be, be tough, suck it up, boys don't cry. I think fortunately we're making some strides in those dimensions, but gendered norms are very hard to change. We know that, and they change slowly. And so when you talk about seeking help and for depression or any mental health concern, there's a lot of vulnerability there. And young men are generally reinforced to avoid being vulnerable and to avoid being feminine. And femininity and vulnerability are inherent to going to see a therapist and admitting one's depressed. So lots of factors there.
My depression stemmed from stuttering because I didn't get the actual help I needed up until I was 16, and so up until then, and I'd gone my whole life with just I know help aside from on my family, and because the speech therapists at home didn't know what to do, and so speaking and then just being made fun of and I ridiculed, just I sent me down a dark path, and there's a point where I just didn't talk. I was just too terrified to, and so trying to communicate my wants and needs were I'm not there, trying to ask for help was just terrifying.
So like the way that I perceive the world is sort of like an almost selfish kind of thing. Like a lot of the things that happen around me, like I always tend to see them as like a direct result of like myself. So like, you know, if I walk into a room and everyone's having a good time, and then all of a sudden like they aren't having as good of a time, I sort of like kind of assume it's my fault, like, and then I like then become harder on myself, like, oh, like it's my fault, like they don't like me, like I'm not a cool person, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I guess it's sort of like the way I view the world and the things that go on around me. I always like find a way to connect like the negative back to myself.
Basically, my brother left in the 8th grade, and he hasn't talked to me or any of my family members since. And you know, like, it's just like losing a loved one, Chris. It's really hard. And I would describe depression as a constant feeling. It's not like something that just, you know, like one day you're sad for a little bit and then it goes away. It's like, it's always there and it's always in the back of your mind.
Sometimes society's pressures around productivity and efficiency may facilitate depression for a lot of individuals, just a feeling that they're not living up to society's expectations or their own expectations or family expectations around, let's say, academics or career or even social situations, and that can lead to a kind of a negative cycle of I'm not doing good enough, well enough, etc., depression, etc.
I'd say when I'm sad, it's sort of something that I struggle dealing with, because like when I'm sad, I tend to just kind of sit down and like sulk all day, like rather than getting up and like trying to improve and like fix my challenges. I just kind of accept them. I just sort of like don't do anything about it.
I'd say it's harder to connect with people or like just deeply trust other people. I mean, it takes a lot for me to like actually trust somebody now.
Everything I'm surrounded by is horrible, because that's how it feels. Everything is wrong and nothing can or will go right.
Like on the outside, I don't really appear as like struggling mentally, because like I'm always like working for my goals and always sort of like I'm always like working hard for the things that I want, and like because of that, like it doesn't really seem like I'm like struggling. But like when you're like searching for perfection, like perfection is never something that you can ever have. So it's sort of like it's a long road that never ends.
A lot of people think that if you have a mental health issue, it reflects some type of weakness, that the person's weak in some way. If a person struggles with clinical depression, that means that they're weak, that there's something wrong with them. Some of the greatest people that I've known have struggled with depression. People who struggle with depression still take care of themselves, take care of their families. It actually shows a great deal of strength, character strength, not weakness, but actual strength. And then I would say, arguably our greatest president, Abraham Lincoln, struggled with clinical depression his whole life, and he still wrote the Gettysburg Address and saved our nation.
I'd say to anyone struggling with like depression or any sort of like mental illness, you just have to realize like you might think like you're the only one out there that like has your own specific problem, whatever it is. But you have to realize like this is a world with like 7 billion people, and there's bound to be someone that can like sort of communicate with you and help you deal with the things you're dealing with.
There's gonna be days that suck, and like days that you just wanna quit, but then there's other days that are like super good, so yeah, just keep going.
My mental health, our perspective changed so drastically, and I'm not sure when or why, because I grew up with that typical stigma of men. I'd be strong and shouldn't try to talk about their feelings, and so that was a big part of my perspective. But is now I shifted to men are just are the same, and they feel the same things, and they should be able to speak out and be heard.
You know, first of all, you can't be afraid to have discussions with people you care about or in your communities around depression or sadness and what's going on in their life. They're not fun conversations. You're not typically seeing them on Facebook and Instagram. But we all can play a critical role in helping recognize, allow that person space to talk, encourage hope. That's one of the most important things about sitting with someone who's depressed, particularly severely depressed, is getting them to have hope for their lives changing in a positive direction.